Question number 2, David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister, does he stand by all his statements?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes.
Does he stand
David
by his
Shearer,
statement?
Supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does he stand by his statement that his government, quote, has a 100% record on the minimum wage? And if so, how does he explain the now $6 an hour plus gap between Australia and New Zealand after Australia raised its minimum wage to $19.80 New Zealand an hour?
Well, Mr Speaker, yes.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes. The government has been raising the minimum wage within the bounds of what we think it is possible to ensure that we preserve people's work. If we look at the minimum wage in New Zealand, it's $13.75. That is half the average adult working wage. That puts us at the highest average in the OECD. We also have a significant payments which we've maintained through the difficult times of working for families. And as I pointed out in the House last week, if somebody earns $40,000 a year, well, you may not want to hear it, but if you want to let me give the answer, I'm more than happy to do so. Okay, so if you go and have a look at someone who earned the minimum wage of $13.75 an hour for 40 hours per week and was bringing up 3 children, that person would earn just a touch under $29,000 a year. They would pay $4,500 in tax, and by the time they got their working for families payments and accommodation supplements, they'd receive over another $20,000 in the hand. That makes New Zealand, on the relative scheme of things, reasonably generous for at-risk and low-income New Zealanders.
Mr Speaker.
David Shearer, supplementary question.
Why does he think a minimum wage worker deserves $3 in New Zealand for every $2? Sorry, $3 in Australia for every $2 they would earn in New Zealand for doing exactly the same work?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, firstly, there are different issues in each country. I mean, there are different costs. The inflation rate's been significantly higher in Australia. For a period of time, they've had higher levels of interest rates. But one of the most important points, Mr Speaker, is there is a balancing act here between making sure that people get pay rises and making sure that people don't lose their job. Now, if the member believes there is no correlation between the two, he's not only demonstrating that he doesn't understand economics, but he's equally free to go and tell New Zealanders on the campaign trail he wants to put them on the dole queue, because that's the simple message he'll be sending them.
Supplementary question, David Shearer.
Is he aware that Australia's unemployment rate is lower than New Zealand's, despite a higher minimum wage? And if so, doesn't that confirm the Department of Labour's finding in 2004 of, quote, positive employment responses to minimum wage increases under the last government?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Yes. I'm surprised the member is spending so much time wanting to quote Australia, because if one looks at a few things that have happened in Australia recently, let's just look at those. Firstly, its unemployment rate is on the way up. Their unemployment rate, our unemployment rate, has been on a track lower. This government is going to get New Zealand back into surplus by 2014-15. The Australian government is likely only to get back into surplus by 2016-17. BNZ believes this government and this country will grow faster than Australia in the next few years. And I notice the member doesn't get on his feet anymore and ask about people leaving for Australia. And the reason is they're not in droves anymore. They're responding to New Zealand. In fact, maybe the member should go and read the Herald last week.
That's a sufficiently long answer. Thank you.
Given that
Supplementary question, David Shearer.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Given that he said in 2008 of New Zealanders leaving for Australia that it was a vote of no confidence in Helen Clark's government, what does he say to people now, given that it's 43% higher today?
That's right. Well, Mr.
Prime Minister. Mr Speaker, yes, some people have left for Australia, a lot more. Well, I'm glad they're cheering, because a lot more of them left under a Labor government, numerically. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And by the way, if it's such a bad place to live, well, if it's such a...
Order. That is a very unsatisfactory interjection coming from over on that side.
Yeah, he should be made to withdraw the podcast.
Supplement?
No, I haven't finished. And if it's such a bad place to live under such a bad government, then maybe someone with Australian citizenship would want to go back to Australia rather than live under this government in New Zealand.
Order. Supplementary question, David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Is he aware that McDonald's, KFC, Starbucks, Pizza Hut, The Warehouse, Farmers, Kmart, Bunnings and Countdown are not implementing his youth minimum wage rates? And if so, does that mean that major corporates actually care more about New Zealanders' standard of cost of living than the government does?
Mr Speaker, yes, Mr Speaker, I'm aware of that. I think the important point to note here is this is the minimum wage. You're not actually required to pay that wage. The vast bulk of New Zealand workers are paid well and truly above the minimum wage, Mr Speaker. But here's a very simple point. If you're 16 or 17, under this government, the message is an employer may give you a chance to get a job. You see, these people on the other side of the House, they don't want to give employers any incentives to take them.
Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister answered the question in the first sentence.
Order. If the member's happy with the answer, then we'll proceed to further supplementary.
Mr Speaker.
Point of order, Honourable David Parker.
We have got into the habit of having long speeches from ministers and answers, and it always requires a point of order from us to bring the answer to an end.
No.
Mr Speaker, that's your job.
That's not right. And if the member wants to have another look at the recording earlier, I brought the Prime Minister to heel only about 2 questions ago when I felt the answer was quite long enough. Further supplementaries, I move to question number 3, Paul Goldsmith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance.